I'm Tim Ventura, and we're joined today by Kevin Day, a retired United States Navy Senior Chief Petty Officer. Kevin is a former operations specialist and TOPGUN air intercept controller with more than 20 years experience in strike group air defense, including wartime operations. He's an expert operator of the highly advanced Spy-1 radar system with years of service on board AEGIS-equipped ships, including the VINCENNES, CHOSIN, and the Princeton. He's logged hundreds of air-to-air intercepts of suspect aircraft in both training and wartime operations. And he joins us today to discuss the Nimitz Carrier Group UAP encounters back in 2004. So Kevin, welcome, sir. Can you tell me a little bit about your role at the time?
Absolutely, Tim. I was a very senior trainer at the time. And it just so happens, this was my very last underway in uniform. I was getting ready to transfer to the Admiral, and I'm providing a little context here so it makes more sense. And I was up on watch, any other watch, I had stood thousands, and I noticed these odd tracks off the coast of Catalina Island. And I say odd because I wasn't fully aware of it at the time, but apparently they were coming from low Earth orbit because our missile defense watchstaffers were watching that piece of sky. I really wasn't, but when they got down to 28,000 feet and just started tracking slowly south right through our airspace, I was like, what in the hell are these? Nothing that high flies that slow. It's gonna fall out of the sky. Wasn't worried about them, thought it was civilian related. We were tracking them on our data links, reporting it back to the beach, until the air wing got on board the Nimitz. We're gonna do an air defense exercise right in that same piece of airspace. And that's when I became concerned from safety of flight, which to this day remains my primary concern.
Yeah. If it's okay, let me back up just a sec. And again, what I'm going to try and do is walk you through the timeline. And that way, and actually that's just as much for me as for anybody else. That way I don't get completely lost. But so at the time, there was former petty officer, third class, Gary Voorhees. He'd told Popular Mechanics that the carrier group was going to be deploying in a few months, and there were a bunch of new systems like the Spy-1 Bravo radar. So is it accurate to say that the Princeton was carrying a lot of new and enhanced sensor capabilities at the time?
That's an accurate statement, correct. Yep.
Okay.
It was one of our roles out there. In addition to training, we were checking out new equipment. You bet. Getting ready to go on the deployment.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that is various people have said, you know, maybe these UAPs have been around a lot. Maybe we just didn't see them before. Maybe it was the enhanced equipment that made them visible. So,
and that's true in the civilian world too. Think of all the new technology out there now, cell phones everywhere.
Yeah.
People are they have the ability to record it now, or before, no.
Yeah. So this initial incident in November, this started with radar techs. And I understand this happened a week before Commander Fravor's encounter, and I'll come back to that in a bit. But it started with radar techs getting ghost tracks and clutter on the radars. And initially, they didn't understand what they were seeing, right?
Well, because we were testing out the new spy system, it's one of the things that we had to check out. So we brought everything down, brought everything up. And it turns out the contacts were actually solid contacts, the highest radar quality you could get. And that was confirmed, of course, when Commander Fravor on Fast Eagle flight did the VID on it, the visual identification on it. It was a solid object.
Yeah, yeah.
Solid object. Yeah.
Well, and that was in my notes as well, is that so you know, these ghost tracks, they led to concerns that the CEC and the Aegis combat system or the Spy-1 radar system might have been malfunctioning. So they actually took down the air control systems, recalibrated, tried to clear out what was thought to be false returns. And if I understand correctly, once the recalibration was complete, the tracks were actually sharper and clearer than before.
That's correct. That's Gary Voorhees' testimony. That's correct. And that's was my observations as well. Stand and watch. Yeah.
So initially, and again, I hope I'm not too pinpoint on this. I'm just trying to go through data points. These initial tracks, these began at an altitude of 60 to 80,000 feet. And then other times they were as low as 30,000 feet, only traveling around 100 knots, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and so they didn't match any known aircraft. They didn't have any IFF or transponder or anything along those lines.
They did not. Nope.
Yeah. Now, so
No,
you're
and no electronic emissions of any kind either. Nothing
okay.
detected on our EW electronic warfare gear.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so your job, I mean, you were the man here. Your job was to man the radars and ID everything that flew in the skies, right? And again, as you mentioned, this is a safety issue. So
Yep. That was my concern, remains so today.
yeah, yeah. Well, so on November 10th, and the dates are a little fuzzy, and that makes sense, but you guys were about 100 miles off the coast of San Diego. You started noticing strange radar tracks yourself near San Clemente Island in groups of 5 to 10 at a time at around 28,000 feet, traveling around 100 knots south.
Catalina Island, not San Clemente.
Catalina Island. Okay.
Catalina. Yeah.
Which is interesting. I've heard a lot of other people mention Catalina Island as well.
They're confused commonly.
Yeah. Okay. You know, and the author of where I pulled my facts from could have confused that.
Yeah.
Now, had you at this time, because as I understand things, the radar techs have been seeing these for a few days off and on before this, right? Had you heard any of the reports from any of the other folks about these strange tracks?
We were all tracking them on the ships, and we weren't concerned about them because we have a thing in the Navy, in all the services called the Notice to Air Mariners. In other words, if there's a published document that tells us everything that's going to fly, that helps us out when we're close to friendly territories, of course, so we can help identify stuff. Well, these objects, whatever they were, weren't listed in the NOTAMs. However, we didn't have any aircraft on board. They, as far as we knew, they didn't even know we were down there, and they were just doing their thing, going slowly down the coast. We're reporting them on our data links, doing our job, reporting them to the beach, and making everyone that cared fully aware that they were there.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like other ships, right? Because this is a carrier group.
Oh, yeah, whole strike group. The whole strike group, Tim. Yeah, the whole strike group.
Oh, okay. So potentially,
not just Nimitz, but there was other ships with us. Yes.
Yeah, and so lots of ships were seeing these on their radars.
Next question, please.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What do you want me to say? Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, and again, I should apologize. You know, so one of the things that was really interesting to me was when I was reading through this. So Gary Voorhees said that he used heavily magnified binoculars to spot these objects visually from the bridge. Now, he said they were visible moving erratically during the day, and they gave off a phosphorus glow as they hovered and darted about at night. Can you tell me anything about these visual sightings? Can you tell me a little bit about what he's told you about them?
Well, absolutely. There's nets on the ship to help us communicate, of course, wearing headsets just like you're wearing now. And everything we're doing in CIC can be listened to on the bridge, of course. So every time we would pick one of these things up on radar, the bridge watchstanders would find it through the binoculars, handheld, and the ship's big eye system on the bridge wings. You got these magnified, you go outside and you look, and you can see stuff magnified. And that's what Gary was talking about. And I myself went up a couple times just to check them out. But unfortunately for me, I didn't see them do anything odd. They were just a boring white light tracking south when I saw them. But apparently other people on the bridge saw them maneuver in unnatural ways, put it that way.
Yeah. Well, no, what's interesting to me about that is you had visual sightings before Commander Fravor's sighting, right?
Oh, yeah, several days. Yeah. We were tracking these objects for several days before the air wing was even on board the Nimitz.
Yeah. And I understand later on, and this would have been, I think, the 2019 incident. There was one that was, again, near Catalina Island. In this later incident, it was the same thing. They were tracking them visually during the day. And then I believe Voorhees had said that they were kind of a phosphorus glow at night. So these things were at night as well.
Yeah, you could see them at night. They were glowing, you bet.
Yeah.
According to the bridge watchstanders. Now, I only saw them in the daytime myself. Kind of correlated them, or towards twilight maybe it was, but according to the other testimony, they were glowing at night. Yes.
Did you see, just out of curiosity, did you see anything interesting? I mean, did you see, it sounds like you couldn't make out any details. You just saw kind of a glowing white light or?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And they were just kind of
When I
hovering.
saw them, just to give you an idea, that these things, according to Commander Fravor's testimony, about 47 feet long. And I was observing them at the time, probably 40 miles away from the ship. So, you know, just a speck in the sky. I couldn't make any detail. Can't even make out Comair at that range. You know what I mean? Other than its profile, of course.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand what you're saying. Well, you know, one of the other things that I had read, and I thought this was really interesting. I think the media got this, but they didn't give it enough attention, was, as I understand things, at least, the ballistic missile defense radar systems detected these in low Earth orbit before they dropped down to 80,000 feet. So, and this was on, I guess this was on November 10th. So basically you got a warning that said these things were in space and they dropped down to about 80,000 feet from there.
Yeah, and I have to cut in right here. At the time this was all happening, that was not my situational awareness. I didn't know about that at the time. I didn't find out later, just so you know. I wasn't, it was not my area of concern. I'm an air defense guy, and threat aircraft don't fly that high. I mean, it could change in the future, but at the time, no.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, so you just weren't aware of that at the time then. Yeah, I thought that was,
I wasn't paying attention. No, because I wasn't paying attention to it. Apparently, yeah. What wasn't my area of focus at the moment? Just like sonar control is, because you're going to ask me probably about objects flown in the water, I would have to imagine, and we'll get to that if you're going to ask it. But it's the same situation. I wasn't aware of any of that.
Well, sure. No, I'd love to ask about sonar. I wasn't aware of that. Did you guys have contacts there?
It was not my, I didn't find out there was anything going in water or anything until days later. It was, at the time, it was not my situational awareness.
It was outside of it.
This object fall from, after Commander Fravor interstated in Fast Eagle, it dropped from where they were, 28,000 feet, straight down to the surface of the water. He followed it down and it went and disappeared right in front of him.
Yeah. And that was a few days later. That was on the 14th. So, but you know, what interested me was these things had been around. They had been noticed. I mean, and it makes sense that these weren't the focus, right? Because you guys are trying to run a carrier group. You're busy. You've got a lot of stuff going on. But it was interesting that
we were watching them. Yeah, we were definitely paying attention to them, wondering what the hell they were.
Yeah.
Reporting them back to the admiral on the beach, you know, just in case they wanted this data. There it is. You guys might know this. I mean, we're reporting it. So what else could we do? We're not going to shoot them down. We couldn't intercept them at the time. So what were we supposed to do?
Did they seem to have an interest in the ships at all, or were they just in the area?
No. Nope. Zero
interest in the ships.
Zero.
Yeah, I was just
at
curious.
no time did they display any interest in us whatsoever.
Did
they wanted to avoid us.
Oh, okay. So they didn't get near. They didn't get near the ships at all.
No, they remained at altitude and kept going south. And if I counted up the course of time we were tracking, they appeared in groups of 5 to 10 each. You count them all up, about 100 tracks over the course of many days. And the curious thing about it, of course, the carrier striker is moving all over the ocean, right? And so is our radar envelope, of course, right? It goes with the ship. Well, those contacts, every one of them disappeared over Guadalupe Island in the same point in the sky.
Oh, okay. So that's the
epicenter. The thing is, it happened in November, right? And I'm thinking of because I'm an avid whale watcher, and I used to do it. I used to enjoy the heck out of going out and watching them, you know, when it was off the coast. And they would go from Catalina area down to Guadalupe Island in November. And that's when I couldn't shake the feeling there was some connection to that somehow at the time. And I didn't voice it to anyone. I wasn't even really brave enough to think it out loud, if you will, because it sounded crazy at the time. But the more I thought about it later, the more it makes sense to me.
Almost there
was some connection with the whales, yeah.
Like Star Trek 4, something like that. Yeah. No, that's interesting. So they disappeared over Guadalupe Island. Well, when these things, and again, this was kind of out of your situational awareness, these drop down to 80,000 feet. They set off the ballistic missile defense thing in groups of 10 to 20, and then they went down to around 28,000 feet after that. And I think you mentioned this during the conference. So they started out high, and then they went down to about 28,000 feet. They're only going about 100 knots, right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. The reason I mention that is Kevin Newth, Robert Powell, and Peter Reale from the SCU, right? They did an analysis on this, and they estimated G forces that could have been measuring in the thousands of Gs. And
well, that's once they were intercepted.
Okay.
But before we started nesting with them, quote unquote, they were simply tracking 28,000 feet going 100 knots until we decided to intercept them, and then all heck broke loose and they started doing their erratic stuff.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Up until that point, no, it was boring. It was just boring tracks we were reporting on the data links.
So they were really straightforward. They'd just be moving south at 100 knots, and then once you did the intercept, they started moving very erratically.
Correct. From that point, it seemed to me once they knew that we were aware of them, then they weren't trying to. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah.
I guess it's as good as yours. I don't know.
No, you know what? I'm just excited to be able to interview you, Kevin. That's the big thing for me. That I'm really excited to be able to have you on.
Thank you, man. The pleasure to do this with you is really good for me. It feels good to talk about it, and I think people need to hear this because there's something to this, man.
Well, you know, the thing that interests me about this, the thing that really excites me about this, stories like this, you're there, you've got a lot of stuff going on, right? Like, as you mentioned, I mean, you're trying to pay attention to a bunch of different things, and you catch details in your mind that you may not know that you caught. And so I think being able to tell the story multiple times and tell it from different approaches, I guess, helps. Sometimes things pop into memory, you know. And then one of the challenges, and this would happen to anyone, but this happened back in 2004, right? So this was,
right.
I mean, this was 18 years ago at this point. Memories like that, it's difficult over time to go back and remember accurately everything. So, you know, I appreciate your sharing this story with me.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, so with Commander Fravor, he attempted to intercept these. This is on November 14th, right? And this is the story that made the headlines. He was in an F-18 Super Hornet, the call sign Fast Eagle 1, and then Lieutenant Commander Jim Slaight was flying another Super Hornet with call sign Fast Eagle 2. So they were, when these UAPs appeared, the Fast Eagle 1 and 2 were initially headed to a combat air patrol point to do exercises. They were already airborne, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and so they've been in the air for about half an hour. You guys saw the
one to launch, and they were at the time we took control. They were the closest to the object, so we just took control. It made the most sense at the time to use them. It just so happened it was them, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just basically they were the closest to it. You were able to redirect them. Yeah.
Correct.
So if I understand correctly, when they did the intercept, and again, this is publicly reported, they noticed a disturbed patch of water, and they described it, I think Fravor described it as it appeared as if there was a large object, maybe a downed aircraft about 10 to 15 feet below the surface. And then they also spotted a white UAP above that looked like a large cylindrical butane tank or tic tac, about 50 feet in length, 10 to 15 feet wide.
That's his testimony. Yep.
Interesting. Unless it was, I mean, maybe it was a whale, you know, maybe that would fit with the whale theory, was that. What, again, something else that the media didn't give a lot of attention to, I thought this was interesting, was, so the disturbance in the water was, again, this was probably about, they estimated 10 to 15 feet below the surface, but the UAP was moving around near the ocean surface, and its movement didn't have any apparent effect on the surface, right? Like, so they didn't have rotor wash or down pressure like you'd have with a low-flying aircraft.
That's Commander Fravor's testimony. I have no
knowledge of Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
you
on
were
the
on the
ship.
you were on the ship with that. You were on the ship. That makes
I've
sense.
heard the same reports you have, put it that way here.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, and you'd mentioned earlier that when he maneuvered closer to get a look at the UAP, it shot across his nose heading south and was gone within a second. Commander Slaight described the acceleration as if it was shooting out of a rifle, and then the disturbance in the water disappeared at the same time. So that would be it. But after the UAP accelerated away at high speed, and I guess you probably would have seen this, you spotted it on radar waiting at the combat assembly point, which was predetermined in secret. So when they got to their combat assembly point, this thing was already there waiting for them. Is that accurate?
Yeah, somehow this object, whatever it was, disappeared right in front of him and reappeared at his assigned combat air patrol station.
Okay, interesting.
At his assigned one. I mean, we have several, right? But this was Fastigle's assigned, and other ones were assigned to other flight crews, of course.
And so it went to
We
his
set 'em up
specifically.
in the direction of the threat, yeah, to protect us. And how did that happen? I don't know. To this
Yeah.
day, that's a big mystery.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that's
fact,
I'm sorry,
Go ahead,
that's
go ahead.
essentially the timeline that I had, but I'm happy to kind of go over things more with you. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty remarkable. Again, in 2019, I forgot the name of the ship. Was it 2019, 2020? There was one that was, again, off Catalina Island, if I remember right. They were doing a patrol and they saw groups of these UAPs in a very similar manner to what you guys described. So it seems like the same series of events, but like, 17, 16 years later, something like that.
I'm glad it's finally being taken seriously. I'm glad it's okay to talk about now. It cost me a second career because no one would listen to me. I got laughed out of meetings. I'd raise my hand and say, "Hey guys, we got a safety issue off the coast and off San Diego." And they're like, "What do you mean, Kevin?" I would try to describe what happened, and I got laughed at, man. I can't even describe how much that hurt. And at one point, even my boss asked me, "Kevin, what have you been smoking?" What? I ended up quitting my job. I couldn't take it. And because of that, Tim, what I did is I was going to go to school, and I did. I got my master's degree, go do something else, which I am. But I ended up back in Phoenix, and I said, "Y'all know what I'll do. I'll fictionalize this whole darn story, and I'll write some other short stories I like to write, and I'll publish the whole thing in the Library of Congress, just in case the story ever becomes public. That my book that I published in early 2009 becomes direct evidence that this thing really happened." Because in my short story, I actually use the word Tic Tac, actually use the word Nimitz in Princeton. There's no mistaking that I wrote about the same thing.
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons why the government came out and had to admit it, because there was evidence that they couldn't. I mean, I don't have a time machine. And that's what happened.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I think this is intensely interesting, right? I mean, you guys had, Fravor had, if I remember right, they had FLIR video of it, right? And so, they've got the video, you have visual sightings, you have, I'm not sure how many systems it showed up on. It showed up on the Spy 1 radar, right?
Yep.
Apparently it showed up on the ballistic missile defense radar system, and that's probably satellite based. So,
and visual, through big eyes, and visual through the cockpit of the Super Hornet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they were real.
Do you think there's any way these were man-made objects?
If I had to assign a probability to it, I would say 4% that it's us. I think the odds are, and the main reason why I say that, and you brought this up earlier, one of the reasons why there is more and more UAP reports now, because there's technology out there. People are able to record stuff that we've been seeing for a long time. So that technology would have had to have been here for a long time, right? Which doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, if this technology existed in 1902, we would know about it by now. Come on. You know what I mean? So,
Well,
no, I don't think it's, I think it's very improbable that it's mankind.
you know, and having done a little bit of research on this, one of the things I found was there were reports off Catalina Island from Boy Scouts in 2011, I think, of seeing very much the same thing. These were scouts who were on the island. I think, if I remember right, there was an entire troop, and they reported seeing something very similar, you know, and then reports in 2019 of something that's almost the same. So whatever this is, I mean, you mentioned Guadalupe Island as kind of a destination point, but it seems like for some reason, Catalina Island seems to be a hot spot for these. Yeah, you know, and something else that I'd read was
And down
someone
in
did,
that water, maybe.
it could be,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
you know, maybe they were, I don't know, who knows? Again, I'm thinking Star Trek 4, maybe they were studying the whales or something along those lines, you know.
Oops, looks like I got someone down the driveway.
Oh, okay. Well, Kevin,
Yeah.
sir, let me thank you so much for your time today. I cannot thank you enough.
Hey, let's let some time go by, and then we'll regroup and do this again at some point in the future, not too long from now.
Perfect.
Sound good? And thank you
Kevin,
again for the opportunity.
thank you again, sir.
Yep. I'm out.